Imagine for a second, like, what if the fundamental laws governing how your brain processes a memory, or how your relationships succeed or fail, and even how the cells in your body generate power, what if all of that isn't locked away in some billion-dollar particle accelerator?
Right, like it's not just accessible to people in lab coats.
Exactly. What if the secret control law of living systems could actually be tested by you right now, just sitting at your kitchen table with your laptop and like basic household items?
It sounds like an incredibly bold claim, I know. But we really are looking at a very real shift in how science is done today. I mean, we are moving into an era where the tools to verify complex universal laws are entirely open source.
Yeah.
They're sitting right in our web browsers, just waiting for anyone to run the data.
Okay, let's unpack this. Our mission for this deep dive is to provide a literal how-to guide for a revolutionary framework called CESM. We're looking at a fascinating stack of open science documents today, specifically two files called invitesupplement.pdf and aninvitation.pdf.
Yeah, and they outline this universal control law for living systems.
Right. But we aren't just going to talk about the abstract theory here. We are going to walk you through exactly how the math works, why it works, and how you can run the starter notebook yourself to test these predictions using public data sets.
Right, because a theory is really only as good as its predictive power, right? And what CESM argues is that life isn't just randomly reacting to its environment. All living things stay alive by continuously steering this single fundamental metaphorical dial.
Right, and they call this the S dial. So to simplify this core servo concept for a non-technical audience, if I'm understanding the physics here, it's basically an internal slider between the known and the unknown.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
Like if your internal dial is pushed below zero, so $2, you are too rigid, you are locked in, heavily exploiting what you already know. In everyday terms, this is tunnel vision.
Right, you're looping the same thought, maybe your jaw is locked, and you just cannot adapt to a new situation.
Exactly. And then on the flip side, if your dial is pushed above zero, if CE galls, you are too scattered.
Yeah, you are constantly exploring new inputs to the point of just total chaos. You can't finish a task. Every tiny stimulus derails your attention, and your nervous system is effectively just buzzing.
Buzzing, right. But the magic happens at zero. If you get that dial to exactly zero or, hover right around it, you hit what the framework calls the self-sustaining horizon, or SSH.
The SSH, exactly.
And this is the perfect energetic balance point. You aren't completely static, but you aren't chaotic either. You're right on the edge of critical stability where you can perfectly exploit your current environment while remaining entirely open to new information.
And what's crucial to understand here is the dynamic mechanism that's keeping you at that 0 point. It's a servo mechanism. Think of it like biological cruise control.
Okay, biological cruise control. I like that.
Right, and there are 4 distinct forces interacting simultaneously to keep a system alive and balanced on this dial. First, you have the drive to exploit, which is pulling you toward certainty. Then you have the drive to explore, pushing you toward novelty.
Okay, that's 2.
Then there's a restoring force stiffness, which acts like a spring, trying to pull the system back to the center when it drifts too far into rigidity or chaos.
And the 4th force is just raw noise, right? Environmental perturbation, which, at first glance, that sounds like a bad thing. But if I'm thinking about this like an engineer, if you have a system trying to find a perfect balance point in a complex landscape, without noise, it would just get stuck in the first comfortable valley it finds, right?
Precisely. It would completely freeze.
Like it would just stop adapting.
Exactly. In physics, we call that getting trapped in a local minimum. If you don't have thermal noise in a physical system or behavioral noise in a biological system, like, I don't know, the kids yelling or a sudden change in the weather, the system stops adapting. The noise constantly knocks the system off balance just enough so that the spring, that restoring stiffness, has to actively pull it back to the self-sustaining horizon.
Wow. Okay, so the noise forces the servo to continuously calculate and adjust.
Right. It's a feature, not a bug.
That makes total sense. Now, if a system is successfully operating at this SSH 0 point, the framework claims it will always exhibit 3 distinct mathematical fingerprints.
Yeah. Yes, and they have to appear simultaneously.
Let's dig into the why of these fingerprints, because they aren't just random trace. Give us some simple examples here. The first one is critical slowing.
Right. So as a system approaches a critical tipping point, that absolute balance at the horizon, its internal dynamics dramatically slow down.
But why does that happen, mechanically?
Well, because that restoring force we just talked about, the stiffness, approaches 0 near a critical transition point. The system becomes highly sensitive, so the spring holding it together gets incredibly
Oh,
loose.
I see.
Yeah, so when the restoring force weakens, it takes the system exponentially longer to recover from even the tiniest fluctuation.
Okay, so it's kind of like riding a bicycle incredibly slowly, right? Like when you're moving fast, the gyroscopic force keeps you upright, you hit a bump, you barely notice.
Right.
But right before you stop completely at that critical point of balance, any tiny shift in your weight causes the whole bike to wobble in slow motion before you tip over.
That's a perfect analogy.
Uh-huh.
Or like a soap film getting taut and really still right before it pops.
Yeah.
The system gets sluggish and sticky right before a phase change.
Sticky, yeah. Okay, so what's the second fingerprint?
The second fingerprint is asymmetric recovery. This means the system's ability to bounce back to center isn't identical on both sides of the dial.
Okay, so the rate of recovery depends on whether I'm coming back from being rigid, like C's dollars rolls, versus being scattered, where C's dollars. But mechanically, why the asymmetry? I mean, why wouldn't a spring just pull back with equal force from both directions?
Because the landscape of living systems isn't a perfectly symmetrical bowl, you know? The thermodynamic cost of being hyper-rigid, locking up all your resources, creates a much steeper energy gradient than the cost of being scattered.
Yeah, okay.
So if you are pushed into the rigid state, the physical or cognitive tension is immense, and the servo will snap you back to the center much faster once the constraint is released.
Okay, so it's like wandering off a trail. If I wander into a flat desert, which is the scattered state, I might meander back slowly, taking my time to find the center.
Exactly.
But if I fall down a steep ravine, the rigid state, I am going to claw my way straight back up as fast as physically possible because the environment demands it.
You got it. You snap back faster from rigidity than from chaos. And then the third fingerprint is low-dimensional collapse.
This one is fascinating. This is where, when a massively complex system, something with millions of independent variables, hits that SSH balance point, all that complexity suddenly collapses down to just 3 to 7 core macroscopic patterns.
Right.
But how does a system with a million moving parts just spontaneously simplify?
It comes down to a principle in complex systems called enslavement. When a system nears criticality, the vast majority of its microvariables lose their independence. The system becomes dominated by a few massive, slow-moving macroscopic forces. We call these the order parameters.
Okay, order parameters.
Yeah, and these macro forces effectively enslave the fast microscopic fluctuations, forcing them to align with the larger pattern.
So I picture like a crowded sports stadium. Before the game starts, you have 50,000 people doing 50,000 different things, buying hot dogs, talking, looking at their phones, high dimensionality.
Total noise.
But the moment an exciting play happens or a wave starts, all those micro behaviors are instantly enslaved by the macro event. Suddenly, the entire stadium's behavior collapses into a single binary dimension. Everyone either stands up and cheers or sits down and groans.
Exactly. The dominant force overrides the local noise. Now, observing these fingerprints conceptually is one thing. It's a beautiful metaphor.
Right, and here's where I want to play devil's advocate for a second. This sounds like a beautiful philosophical metaphor, but how is this actual hard science that we can prove?
That is the crucial question. And what makes this framework truly remarkable is that they translated this servo mechanism into 14 highly specific, mathematically falsifiable predictions. And they challenge anyone to verify them using open source data sets and public data analysis tools.
Yes. So let's get our hands dirty here. Let's explain how to test CEASM using only household items and a laptop. We're going to verify one of the 14 predictions with public data, specifically prediction 14.
Right, P14.
All you need is a library laptop or your home computer. You download a starter zip file, which contains a Python notebook.
And what the starter notebook actually does is it automatically pulls in a data set from a published neurobiology study on crows. Specifically, it analyzes the crow's NCL, which operates essentially like our prefrontal cortex.
Okay, so crow brain data.
Yes. The researchers who originally published this crow data measured 12 different time constants in the neurons. Basically, they measured the durations of working memory, tracking how long these neuron populations hold on to specific bits of information.
And these timescales vary wildly, right? Like from incredibly fast microprocesses at 15 milliseconds all the way up to sustained memory loops lasting 6,000 milliseconds.
Exactly. Now, a skeptic might assume those varying times are just random biological noise, or maybe they just map to whatever random tasks the bird was doing at the time.
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. CASM predicts these durations are strictly governed by a geometric structure called an Ecker spacetime crystal.
Right.
And according to this geometry, the time constants must form a precise ladder where each duration is exactly 3.44 times longer than the previous one.
It's an incredibly risky, highly specific mathematical prediction. I mean, it's not a doubling ratio of 2, which you see in musical octaves.
Right.
It's not the natural logarithm e, which is about 2.71, which governs a lot of biological growth. It specifically demands 3.44.
Okay, wait, stop right there.
Sure.
Why? Why does this Ecker spacetime crystal demand the number 3.44? It sounds like magic math. What is the physical mechanism that forces a bird's brain to use that specific gear ratio?
Well, it's fundamentally a problem of optimal packing. Imagine the bird's brain is a physical space, but instead of packing physical objects, it has to pack temporal processes.
Okay.
It needs to process ultra-fast immediate reactions and slow, sustained planning simultaneously, without these cognitive rhythms interfering with each other. The Ecker crystal models this as a logarithmic spiral. Think of the tightly packed seeds in a sunflower, or, the chambers of a nautilus shell.
Oh, wow. Okay.
To perfectly tile this temporal space, to cram the maximum amount of distinct processing scales together without any gaps or overlapping interference, the geometric multiplier required is approximately 3.44.
So it's basically an internal gear system. If you build a bicycle and you want the gears to cover the widest possible range of speeds with maximum thermodynamic efficiency, the gears can't just be random sizes.
Exactly.
Each gear has to be a very specific mathematical ratio larger than the last, or the chain will slip and you waste energy. The crow's brain is mathematically geared for maximum temporal efficiency.
Precisely. So the open science test here is to literally reanalyze the crow data to see if the timescales follow the 3.44 ratio. You run the starter notebook, provided in the zip, to check the results.
And running the notebook is simple, right?
Very simple. The code takes those 12 raw time constants and converts them into log values.
Right, and we plot log values to confirm if the slope matches the Ecker geometry. Because if you take an exponential geometric series, like a ladder, multiplying by 3.44 every step, and you plot the logarithm of those values against their sequence order, it should give you a perfectly straight line.
Exactly. It's a classic log linear plot to expose hidden geometric scaling.
And the slope of that line will reveal the exact multiplying ratio hidden in the raw data. So what are the results when we run it?
When you run the analysis, the code plots the line and calculates the slope. And the result is a best fit of 3.11 with an uncertainty margin of 0.11.
Which is absolutely stunning,
Yeah.
because a slope of 3.11 completely destroys the null hypothesis of a simple doubling ratio of 2.0.
Right. It throws it out entirely.
And it decisively rejects the natural log expectation of 2.71. It lands right in the targeted probability envelope of that 3.44 Ecker geometry prediction. The brain of a crow is literally operating on this geometric control law, like walking into a clock shop where gears keep different times every 1 second, then 3.4 seconds, then 11.8 seconds. But they're all perfectly geared together by the same universal factor.
It's beautiful, but if this is a universal control law, we have to follow the logic. If this optimal scaling ratio governs the working memory of a bird, does it govern human physiology as well?
Right. If it's universal, it has to be everywhere. And that brings us to prediction 10, which scales this exact ratio across our own distinct biological rhythms.
What's fascinating here is how we can estimate the relaxation scaling factor using 4 distinct biological rhythm measurements inside a human being. Let's start at the foundational cellular level.
Okay.
The mitochondria, the energy generators inside your cells, have a functional oscillation rhythm that cycles at roughly 0.3 seconds.
Okay, 0.3 seconds for the cellular engine. Now let's do the math. If the theory holds, we multiply that by our geometric ratio. Let's use 3.47 for this estimation. 0.3 multiplied by 3.47 gets us to roughly 1 second. What biological process peaks every 1 second? Human heart rate variability.
Exactly. Now take that 1 second cardiovascular rhythm and multiply it by 3.47 again. You arrive at roughly 3.5 seconds.
And what's that?
In behavioral science, 3.5 seconds is the exact average natural rhythm of conversation turn-taking. It's the baseline temporal loop of human verbal interaction.
Okay, that is wild. From a heartbeat to a conversation. Let's do it one more time. Multiply that 3.5-second conversation rhythm by 3.47. You land right around 10 to 12 seconds. And what is that? In the literature, it's called the rhythm of dyadic joint action, or the whole meal rhythm. It's the natural temporal cycle of 2 people cooperating on a physical task, like passing tools while building something, or pacing the physical actions of sharing a meal.
It's all connected through nested clocks. The physical mechanism here is nested phase locking. Because each rhythm is a distinct multiple of the underlying ectogeometry, the macroscopic rhythms can effortlessly enslave the microscopic ones without friction.
Wow.
Your social interactions dynamically phase lock with your cardiovascular system, which is phase locked to your cellular metabolism. And they are all geared together by this 3.44 to 3.47 ratio.
It proves that the self-sustaining horizon is a physical scaling law echoing from a single cell all the way up to complex social dynamics. Now, obviously you can test the CRO data with the provided scripts on your laptop, but, and I know what you're thinking, you don't have the tools to measure mitochondrial oscillations in your kitchen.
No, probably not.
But the framework actually outlines exactly how you can build a personal testing protocol. We can outline simple home tests to track your personal daily rhythm S-dial.
Yes, you can describe simple ways to track personal S-dial states at home using HRV data. If you have an Apple Watch or any smart wearable, you check your morning HRV, specifically the RMSSD score.
That RMSSD score gives us the physiological baseline. But to map the full servo, the protocol pairs this with a proxy metric for cortisol, your primary stress hormone.
Right.
Now, I have to push back hard here for a second. If we are talking about rigorous, mathematically precise system science, how can we substitute a highly complex blood hormone like cortisol with me just subjectively guessing my sleep quality on a scale of 1 to 5 and like noting what time I open the blinds? That feels incredibly loose. It borders on pseudoscience.
I completely understand the skepticism. I really do.
Yeah.
But it actually perfectly aligns with the complex systems theory we just discussed, macroscopic observables.
Okay, explain that.
Well, we don't need to measure the velocity of every single microscopic molecule in a room to accurately measure the room's temperature, right? Temperature is a reliable macroscopic proxy. In chronobiology, your sleep architecture and the exact timing of photic resetting when bright light hits your retina are the dominant macroscopic drivers of the cortisol awakening response. By tracking those two macro variables, you are capturing the vast majority of the variance in your actual cortisol curve without needing a daily blood draw.
Okay, that's fair. So the macro overrides the micro. So you take your daily HRV score, log your sleep and morning light time, and then add a subjective check-in. You just ask yourself, am I feeling heavily rigid and locked in today, or am I feeling scattered and distracted?
Yes. And by logging this, you are actively charting where you sit on that Zittel dial.
Yeah.
And once you establish that baseline, you can test the asymmetric recovery fingerprint on yourself.
How do you do that?
Next time you get into a heated argument, which is a highly rigid state where Zittel actively note how long it takes for your heart rate and your emotional state to snap back to center.
Ah, and then compare that to a day where you are completely scattered, endlessly scrolling through tabs, unable to focus. Note how long it takes to center yourself from that positive Zittel state. The mathematical prediction is that your recovery time from the rigid argument will be demonstrably faster than your recovery time from the scattered distraction.
Exactly. You can also self-test for critical slowing. The easiest way to observe this is right before an aha moment.
Like figuring out a problem while washing dishes?
Right. The framework mathematically predicts that just before your brain executes a sudden flash of insight, your neural activity enters a 300 to 800 millisecond window of profound quiet, a massive drop in variance.
So try to catch this in the wild. You're doing the dishes, thinking about a problem at work, and right before the solution hits you, pay attention to your physical state. Your breath might pause. Your peripheral vision narrows. That tiny momentary stillness right before the soap film pops. That is critical slowing in real time.
Which leads to the most important part of this entire deep dive. Once you run the log linear plots on the CRO data, and once you start tracking your personal Zittel at home, you aren't just a passive reader, you are part of the data set.
Yes. Let's detail how community members can contribute results to the open science dataset. The researchers behind this framework have designed this explicitly as a decentralized open science initiative.
They want you to test the code. They want you to try to falsify their predictions.
And contributing requires absolutely zero budget, no personal data, and no lab equipment, just an internet connection.
And for the IT hesitant, if Python is blocked on your computer or you don't know how to install it, you can just upload the notebook to Google Colab and run it there directly in your browser with no installation needed.
That is so cool. And reporting your findings is brilliantly simple. You don't have to write a multi-page, peer-reviewed analysis. You just share one-line summaries to report findings from your test notebooks.
Exactly. You run the data script, you look at the final slope it calculates, and you share it. Your contribution could literally just be P14 fit equals 3.11, P4 peak equals 2.5 hertz.
that one sentence is a valid, verifiable contribution to mapping a universal control law.
It's a reminder that science isn't just something that happens in closed laboratories. True scientific progress happens when tools are shared, allowing anyone to apply critical thinking and verify the mechanics of the world for themselves.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at what we've uncovered today. We started with this elegant idea of the ES dial, governed by a servo mechanism constantly balancing our need to exploit with our need to explore, using environmental noise to keep us from getting stuck.
Right.
We looked at how this balance leaves physical fingerprints like the critical slowing of a wobbly bicycle or the rapid asymmetric recovery from a steep ravine.
We then dove into the data, running a log linear analysis on a crow's brain to reveal a hidden Ecker spacetime geometry, proving that cognitive memory operates on a strict 3.44 mathematical gear ratio.
And we scaled that 3.44 gear ratio all the way from the microscopic engines of our cells up to the rhythm of our conversations. And we finished by breaking down how to chart your own physiological balance at home using heart rate variability and macroscopic proxies.
It's a lot of ground to cover.
It really is.
Yeah.
So what does this all mean?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the ultimate implication of this framework, if this self-sustaining horizon is truly the universal math of living, adaptable systems, it completely changes how we should be thinking about the future of artificial intelligence.
Oh, wow. Wait, really? How so?
Right now, we build AI architectures to blindly optimize for specific goals, right? And we push them until they hallucinate or break. But imagine future distributed AI networks that are fundamentally tuned to this exact biological scaling law.
Okay, I'm tracking.
By integrating ultra-precise cold atom clocks, we could build artificial agents that don't just optimize, but actually servo-actively, seeking a dynamic balance between exploring and exploiting, using noise to avoid local minima, exactly like a human heart or a crow's brain does.
That is mind-bending.
By decoding the math of biological balance, we might have just uncovered the blueprint for building genuinely stable, healthy artificial minds.
That is absolutely wild. From the neurons of a crow to the foundational architecture of future AI, all mathematically verifiable right from your browser at your kitchen table. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We highly encourage you to pull down that starter code, test the geometry, map your own dial, and as always, keep exploring.